I have said this Jesus frequency, done a few sermons on it, just to say that we want to use those four emblems: coffee, soft eyes, soft hands to touch, and then the word. We try to say this is what our congregation is about. We want to do these four things. Why do we want to do these four things? Because Jesus says you must love. When they say wat is die grootste gebod uit die 613 wette, what is the biggest commandment? Love your God, love yourself, and love your neighbor. Okay, how can I love my God, myself, and my neighbor? To make it very practical, we want to use four habits or four emblems. We want to say that if you touch someone softer, it's a way of in which Jesus worked with people. Jesus never had a hard touch, if you think about it. Peter cuts off one of the Roman soldiers' ear, and Jesus picks up the ear and he replaces it, puts it back. Nay. Jesus, never touched anyone physically or hit him physically. He touched in a different way. He looked in a different way. He saw things in a different way. I will do the one on the Word of God, and then today is about coffee. And then last week I did one on gratitude. I just felt I really wanted to do a sermon on gratitude. So to work with these four emblems, we've done soft eyes, we've done soft touch. This morning I want to talk about coffee. If you love coffee or wine, but coffee, I like coffee. Whoa, it's jumping a bit. The whole idea is the Blaupunt radio, Blaupunkt radio. You remember it? Julle onthou hom. Ek baie van julle skud julle kop. Julle onthou hom. The draadloos. When we go to the farm, my dad usually put the radio there, and it's got that little aerial, and then you have to use the aerial, and you have to tune it, fine tune it, and but like my kids, they don't know anything about it. But you have to finely tune it and listen to say, there's the station I want. En dan is dit Sakkie Sarel se boeremusiek op Saterdag of classical music at evening, but you have to fine tune it to the thing you want, to the music you want to hear. That fine tuning is the same with religion. God is everywhere. He's working, He's talking. And for us, we need to tune into Him, because we're so busy with our own things, we mistune it. So to tune in, to understand His touch, His eyes, and this morning, why is part of this tuning is using coffee as an emblem. Interesting, I did a lot of research on coffee because I'm a coffeeholic. Is this a word? Ek's a coffeeholic. I really love coffee. Like my wife, when I walk past a coffee shop, she says, don't you want to go in? And I say no. Then she says, something wrong. She wants to check my temperature or something. Do you know it comes from a bean, or from a bessie, eintlik van 'n bessie af. It was discovered in Ethiopia. There's many origin stories about it. It was discovered in Ethiopia. And the interesting story about coffee, and I've got a photo for you, is it was a goat herder that was sitting in the field, and he watched his goats running around crazy. And he saw his goats ran like this, and he discovered this berry. It looks like that. And his goats ate this berry. And toe gaan hulle mal. And he took this berry and he tasted it, and it tasted pretty weird. It tasted like coffee. So he took it to a monk. He gave it to a monk, and the monk obviously didn't approve. I saw they got a photo there. The monk ate the coffee and he said, it's so bad. And the monk was sitting at a fire, so he took the berry, or the bessie, he threw it into the fire, and it roasted the bessie. And that's how they started roasting coffee. Or that's one of the origin stories. There could be other stories. From that origin of coffee, of the coffee bean being roasted, it was in Ethiopia. It became a big commodity. At first they used it in monasteries, and for the monks they use it. They especially used it to stay awake, obviously with the caffeine. And they also used it as medicinal. You'll know why if you drink coffee. So coffee was used for that. Interesting, it became such a special commodity that they traded with it. And they even had people being killed for coffee because it became such a special thing. Today, the prices of coffee is skyrocketed. Ek het julle al gesien wat kos koffie. 'n Blikkie koffie is, ek sê gister vir my vrou, seker met R100 op. It's become very expensive. So in the Dominee world, we drink a lot of coffee. Like many times they tell me, Willem, you can just have an appointment. You don't need to arrange a coffee date. But dominees drink a lot of coffee. But what happens with coffee? And why do we want to make coffee one of our emblems? I mean, we can use wine, we can use so many other things, but why coffee? Wine has the same effect, but wine could also have negative effects. Too much wine, we know, can have negative effects. But what happens with coffee? Let's talk about spaces. When you drink coffee, there is certain things that happen to you. The aroma of coffee is usually something that wakes you or awakens you. The smell of coffee is quite nice. Have you walked into a coffee shop or past a coffee shop and you smell it? It's quite nice.
When you invite someone for coffee, you create a space. Like for instance, as jy 'n vriendin nooi vir koffie, of jy nooi iemand vir koffie, dan create jy 'n space. Koffie maak dat jy it sets the environment and it sets the tone for a certain dialogue. I've had so many pastoral conversations with coffee because it calms you down, and the space in which coffee happens is an intimate space. If you drink coffee with your wife, for instance, in a coffee shop, it's an intimate space. It's a space. Why is it intimate? Firstly, because no one can shout. So if you want to fight with your husband, go drink coffee with him in a coffee shop. Because then no one can shout. Mans, as julle julle vrouens wil vat, as jy weet sy's wild in die kop, vat haar na 'n coffee shop toe. Sy gaan nie skree nie. Sy gaan nie skree nie. Because she can't, it's a public space. It's called a neutral space. You can't get aggressive. When you're at home, you can shout and she can throw knives. But when you're somewhere else, it's a neutral space. So I had this very, very wise dominee that I always admire and listen to. And he taught me about spaces, and he's good in counseling, really good in counseling. And he told me that there are different spaces or spheres in life. And for instance, he said that in your bedroom, you should never fight in your bedroom. Because your brain starts associating your bedroom with a negative space. Because we fought so many times in this space, I don't want to enter the space. A good example of this is die hoof se kantoor. When you get called into the headmasters of the hoof se kantoor, how do you feel? Good. Relaxed. Just the word, headmaster's office. Michael Pretorius, kom asseblief na die hoof se kantoor toe. Ja. You're already in fight or flight. You're not in a neutral space. So your brain starts associating places or spheres with certain emotions. We want coffee as an emblem because it suggests spaces where we can talk. Spaces where we can be safe. Spaces where we can cross bridges. Spaces where we can build relationships. And that's why we're talking about coffee as one of the emblems. It is interesting, I did a bit of reading through the word, that Jesus, there's so many aspects, it's so layered when you go through the Gospels on what he did. And what was one of the interesting things I read was in Luke 5, Jesus knew about spaces. He was aware of when to say what. Like for instance, in Luke 5, he says, yet the news about him spread all the more, so the crowds of people came to hear him and to be healed by the sicknesses. Verse 16. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Now, interesting, if you read the Gospels, every time he does something big, the next step is to withdraw and go someplace quiet and pray. So he was aware of spaces and he used spaces. There's a Greek word for it, the eremos, or the eremos is the plural. And this is the word that is used in the Gospels, especially to say that these lonely places he went to. The use of the eremos is prayer scenes emphasize Jesus' need for uninterrupted connection with the Father, contrasting with his public ministry. Hulle gebruik daai eremos of eremois woord. Elke keer as hy sê en Jesus het gegaan na die wildernis of na 'n stil plek toe. He looked for an intimate space where he connected with his Father. And he does it right throughout his life and right throughout his ministry. And I thought about this, like, that's why we want to use coffee as an emblem. Because coffee is a habit. Because we don't want you to just drink coffee with people. We want you to drink coffee with yourself. In the morning when you wake up, my wife wakes me up with coffee. One day. One day she'll wake me up with coffee. You drink coffee with yourself. What do? You go through your day. What do? You plan. You think. Can that not be a place of prayer? Can you not make yourself a cup of coffee in the morning and go sit down and just be still and listen and pray? And I mean, jy hoef nie almal koffie te drink nie. It's just an idea. Create a space where you can become quiet and intimate with God. So Jesus did it a lot. He used this eremos. He used it to connect and reconnect with the Father. There is, in the English Bible, the eremos is rendered as a solitary place. So, hy het verskillende vertalings, maar die idee bly dieselfde. The idea stays the same, that it's a place or a sphere that Jesus went to connect to the Father. This was a lonely place, a deserted place, a wilderness. It depended on the context. Like in many scenes in Mark and Luke, it's a solitary place or a lonely place. It's typically to emphasize the seclusion over aridness. In temptation scenes, it's interesting that this eremos, this isolation scene, was also a scene of temptation, also the scene of the wilderness. However, the main goal of the eremos is to discover a space where you can be robust, honest, broken. I think it's the same place that Jesus went to when he prayed to the Father before he died or before he went to the cross. So the eremos refers to physical locations with minimal human presence. We want to use coffee as an emblem, not to say we want a lot of people. Coffee is a way to reduce a lot of people and create intimacy. When you're in a coffee shop, there's a lot of people, but you're aware of only those at the table, except the others around. That's why we're not going to use wine or brandewyn, because wine and brandewyn makes everyone louder and everyone more friendly. Coffee creates intimacy. So this physical location with minimal presence or human presence, such as wilderness areas, rural fields, or quiet spots near towns, it happens in his prayer context. You can read Mark 1 verse 35, Luke 4, and Luke 5. It likely denotes areas outside urban centers. So what happened is he did a big ministry and then he withdrew and then he went to pray. And then he did a big ministry and then he went to pray. Like for instance, waar hy die broodjies en die visies vermeerder, where he multiplies the bread and the fish. He does it and then he withdraws. Each time to reconnect with his Father. And there's a big pattern in that, which is quite nice. For instance, in the life of a dominee, on Sundays you preach. However, in the week you have to hear. Because you can't just preach on a Sunday. You need to somewhere create a space where you can connect with God and listen. And it's the same with all of us. If we go to work or if we do something, we need to create spaces where we are quiet and where we connect with God. For Jesus, this was very important. This is why one of the emblems, I think, and you can all agree with me or disagree with me, but I want you all to buy into this image of coffee. It's not about coffee. It's about spaces and relationships. There's an amazing text. There's two examples, like for instance, where Jesus created these spaces early in the morning. In Mark 1 verse 35, he says, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up. He left the house and went off to a solitary place. This eremon tuapos, the place where he prayed. At daybreak, Jesus went out to a solitary place and he prayed. Prayer isn't about, liewe Jesus, dankie vir alles. Liewe Jesus, ek wil asseblief. I think prayer is an active thing. Early in the morning, I try to make this habit where I make coffee for me in a big flask or flask, and I put it and I drop the kids off, and I try to build in a moment of solitude, a moment of stillness before everything, because I think it's biblical. Because if I don't do that, I become anxious, I become full of road rage, I become annoyed. But you need that contrast to a world that's eagerly rushing and jaag and praat. You need the contrast of stillness. And Jesus did it. Jesus did it early in the mornings, which you can do it early in the mornings, or maybe late at night. There's another oom that taught me, if I asked him, what was the main ingredient for your marriage? He said, ek en die tannie het tee gedrink. Ek sê, ons drink ook tee, dit help nie. Hy sê, nee. We drank tea every night. After we put the kids to sleep, it was me and my wife, and we drank tea. And it doesn't matter how mad you are at the other person, you will come and sit down and drink tea. So even if you don't say anything to the other person, you will come and drink tea. Because it's a moment of reconnection. It's a moment and a space that forces you to reconnect with someone. The biggest example I want to use of a space, an intimate space, is how Jesus integrated this space, how he used the space to declare and to connect with God, is in Matthew 16. Ons ken die teks in Matthew 16. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do people say the Son of Man is? Now I thought, why does the text say when Jesus came to Caesarea Philippi? Why is it important to say where Jesus is? And then the next verse to say, who do the people say I am? I want to see why do these two fit? Because when you say something in a context, it matters. So I discovered a really interesting thing is that Caesarea Philippi was located at about 25 miles north of the Sea of Galilee at the base of Mount Hermon. It was a Gentile region, met ander woorde 'n ongelowige gedeelte. There was not only Jewish people, but there was also Greeks and everyone who believed different gods and different things. So he's in that area. So the setting is diverse. It's plural. En baie kry nou nie regte woord vir dit. Die verskillende mense, verskillende tale. But also the terrain in which he said it, there were rocky cliffs, caves, and springs feeding the Jordan River. The area featured a large rock face with a cave. Now this cave, and especially this area, Grotto of Pan. This area in which he stood, you can imagine, it's sort of this mountainside, and there's a lot of different types of people there. And in that specific area, he says, who do the people say I am? So if you ask who the people say I am, the Jews would obviously say that he's the king of the Jews. The Gentiles would say he's some sort of magician that does wonders and signs. And then you get the disciples who say he's the Son of God. But at the backdrop, there's caves and rocks. There's even a cave there which they said that it was the entrance to Hades. Now Hades was the underworld of the death itself, and the god of death. So in these caves, these Jewish people, these Greek people, there's the imminent presence of death. So daar's hierdie grot, hierdie gat. En hulle het geglo dat dit die ingang na Hades toe was. They said when you died there, you would enter the cave and your spirit would enter the cave and you would go to Hades. So in that context, he says, who do the people say I am? Which is really interesting. And then Peter, the name Petros in Greek, means stone or rock. So in this rocky backdrop, he uses the name Peter, meaning stone or rock, which is a masculine noun. And he uses the word rock again, not Petros and then Petra, a feminine noun meaning rock or bedrock. So Petrus wat die rots is, sal die rots wees, sy belydenis waarop ek my kerk sal bou. So imagine the power of this setting. The place in which Jesus stood was full of mountains and death, Jews, Gentiles, and all these different places. But death was most prominently there. There was this cave. But there's a rock on which he will build his church. I don't know if this is true or not, but I mean, it's the very same rock or the rock that they rolled away when the tomb was empty. Die graf is leeg. And Jesus says, I will build my church on a rock that not even death itself will defeat. Ongelooflik. Die setting, net die woord Caesarea Philippi, net die plek waar hy is, the place where Jesus is, where he says, I will build my church on the confession of Peter. Peter, whose name is the rock, his confession will be the bedrock on which the church will be built, is in the midst of chaos. And in the midst of chaos, there will be stability in the form of the church. Amazing. That's what Jesus does with settings and places. I've got the Hades there for you if you want to read further, and if you want to check online, you can read it further. I asked AI to generate an image of it. It sort of had something to do, it created something like this, if you would think of a setting. So you can imagine that setting there where you would stand there, you would see that hole, that presence of death there. You would see the chaos. There would probably be more people there. And he says, who do the people say I am? You are Jesus. The whole idea and why we want to put in coffee as a metaphor is not to say that you have to drink coffee. It's because I believe the church should be a space that reads the times. The church should be a space where when death is there, when chaos is there, the church is the rock. It's the safe space. Coffee creates the safe space where we can be, where we can share. I've had so many coffee conversations where people start to cry. Why would you cry when you drink coffee? Because you feel safe. Because you feel safe. When you go to someone's house and they give you coffee, you feel safe. That's why we want it as one of the habits. It's not just a superficial, we drink coffee, we build relationships. If we really want to be church, we want to create spaces that are safe, that proclaim the message of Christ. And this space that the church creates is a safe space. Okay, so let's get more practical. Why do we have care groups and different groups? We don't want it all to be care groups. The groups are spaces in which we want you to feel safe. There's enough danger in this world. There's enough jealousy in the world. Daar's genoeg geskinder in die wêreld. Ons moet daarna strewe en werk om 'n kerk te wees waar ons sê ons skinder nie. Ons vertrou mekaar, ons huil by mekaar, ons genees by mekaar. That's what we're aiming for. That's why we're going to touch people and work with people softer. We're going to look at people softer. And we're going to drink coffee with people so that all that can manifest in a space, an intimate space, where the message of Jesus can become the truth. I really pray that you discover God this week and that you share this with each and every one.